Hey everybody, welcome to Strategy 9, Recasting. I'm really excited for this presentation and to talk a little bit more in detail about this strategy because this is a strategy that I'm using every day and I'm sure you are too, you're just unknowingly. So recasting is all about providing the adult model of language and speech sounds for your child to hear based upon what they say. So meaning if my child says something that's not grammatically correct or with the wrong speech sounds, I'm providing that adult model of what they said with the correct grammar and with the correct speech sounds. And I'll give some examples here shortly. So, what is recasting is the first thing on our agenda. Then we're going to jump into the science behind the strategy, why use it, putting it into practice, and some common questions about using the strategy. So, what is it? I like to think of recasting as a friendly echo with a twist, meaning I'm repeating my child's words back grammatically correct and with the correct speech sounds. So this is a strategy that all parents can use because it's developmentally appropriate. It's normal for kiddos to not be using the correct grammar as their language skills emerge. Same with speech sounds, right? It's developmentally appropriate for there to be speech sound errors. So I'm providing that adult model for grammar and speech for my child to hear. So they have another opportunity to learn the adult version. So again, I wrote the next point being modeling adult version of language. So it's a great way for a child to hear a grammatically correct and with the correct speech sounds of whatever they say. So the science behind this strategy, a study by Nelson suggests that recasting can be especially effective in enhancing language acquisition in children. So in terms of their understanding of language and building upon their language development. And researchers reported that children who experienced recasting from their parents, so parents who used this strategy that we're talking about, showed increased complexity in their own language over time, meaning they continued to progress in their own language development and their language became more complex over time. So why use recasting? Well, it's nurturing confident communication in a child because I have no expectation for them to respond, and I'm validating their feelings because I'm repeating what they said. So I like to think of it as positive correction. I'm just gently providing a correct version of what they're saying. And then I also wrote language complexity boost, meaning I'm introducing more complex language structures than they're already using themselves, but just slightly. So an example of this, and I think I might have this example on the next page, is if a child says, "me want it," right? I'm boosting their language complexity because I can recast it and say, "I want it," right? And provide that correct model. And then I also put on here unconscious learning because I'm helping them learn language in a subtle and very indirect way, right? And the distinction here would be I'm not saying, say it like this, repeat it back to me, repeat it back to me. I'm just doing it in a very subtle, indirect way, keeping it positive. So when I'm putting recasting into practice, think of it as an echo with an improvement. So building upon whatever they say, when they make a statement, I'm repeating it back with the grammatical adjustments and correct speech sounds. It's very important that I maintain contextual relevance, meaning when I recast what my child says, again, my goal is to recast their original statement. So I don't have to change their sentence too much. An example of this would be if my child said bid tat or bid cat for big cat. I can recast it and say, yeah, a big cat. And you can see how I'm even gently emphasizing those speech sounds that were in error. And another example of a grammatical version would be me like the dog. So it's grammatically incorrect because it's me, the child is saying me versus I, and there's a speech sound in there, the W for an L substitution, which is very common. So the child says, me like the dog. I'll say, yeah, I like the dog. And I can make it very subtle, or I can emphasize it a little more occasionally and say, I like the dog. So I'm holding on to that speech sound ever so slightly. So a couple of pro tips. based on what I just said, gently emphasize the correct sounds. So if I'm working with a child who is, so I think, well, firstly, familiarizing yourself with what speech sounds most children typically acquire or master and at what age. So in the Unlock Your Child's Language ebook, there's a page in there that tells you all of the speech sounds, and when it's in a meta-analysis, meaning it's analyzing many studies. I think it's 15. I could be wrong there. But when 90% of children at a given age master speech sounds. And so familiarizing yourself with that will be helpful in knowing, hey, if I have a 3-year-old, what sounds should I or typically expected to be mastered by a 3-year-old? And this gives me a little bit, this gives me an idea of where to start, where I'm gently emphasizing those correct sounds. I can do it for all sounds, or I can just give a little additional support and emphasize those correct sounds for those sounds that are right above where my child, where they're heading, right? So they're within reach, but the child is still mastering those sounds. Another pro tip is no expectation for my child to respond. It really is purely about language exposure and providing them with the correct version of what they're saying that's grammatically correct with the correct speech sounds, like I said. You can also pair this strategy, and I like to pair this strategy with expansions, not always, but occasionally, because I can add on to, so for example, if a child says ka for cat, right, that counts as a word. It's normal for a child who is 2 to have final consonant deletion, meaning they might leave off that last sound in k, at. They might just say cat, totally normal. I can say big cat or more cat, right, if the cat ran away. And so you can see how I can pair expansions with the recasting strategy. Some common questions I get when discussing the recasting strategy is, how do I recast without sounding like I'm correcting? I think what helps me is keeping my tone conversational and enthusiastic. So I'm focusing on the content rather than the form. And again, if I use this strategy in a low stakes environment and I'm not putting expectations for my child to respond, it just feels like I'm validating my child's feelings. Should I recast every sentence my child says? I think this would be a really tricky thing to do, to recast everything your child says. So I think using it with some balance, and I would recommend picking one of those over 40 daily activities, give it a try just during that daily activity, see how your child responds, and then expanding upon there. But it's not necessary to always recast and always repeat whatever your child says. What if my child repeats the incorrect form? So if my child repeats the incorrect form again, no problem, I can just recast it again. So if my child says ca and I say cat, and they say ca, cat, that's completely okay. I can continue to recast and model, especially if they're being enthusiastic and they're looking at me like, yeah, cat, like I've validated their feelings and their language. So embracing language growth, recasting is gentle and effective. I'm nurturing confident communication. Recasting is one of those strategies that I share with parents so often, because there's many kids out there who, well, all kids at some point, right, are learning to master those speech sounds, and parents want to know how to respond to errors in speech sounds or errors in grammar. And it's just providing that adult model. You're giving your child the adult version, and they're hearing it correctly. The more they hear it correctly, the more opportunities they have to learn it and use it correctly themselves. So some closing thoughts, like the previous strategies, go check out that recasting strategy page, print it off, laminate it. It's simple and effective. It leads to improved speech and language skills. I would recommend going to check out one of those over 40 daily activities where I give specific examples of what children might say and how you could recast it. Pick one of those daily activities, give it a try, let me know how it goes. If you have any other questions about recasting, how to use it, what it is, feel free to reach out to me. I'll see you in our next and last presentation, for the time being, sabotage. So I'll see you here shortly.